Welcome back to Grim and Whim. You've probably seen the videos on TikTok or Instagram, people who have these exotic animals like monkeys or even grizzly bears or these big cats, lions, tigers, like Joe Exotic. And it can be a pretty remarkable and even adorable sight to see someone snuggle up with their baby tiger or doing tricks with their pet monkey. You might even forget that at the end of the day, this is a wild animal and they aren't domesticated. Wild animals are unpredictable and they don't just become domesticated overnight. According to most animal protection experts, it takes about 12 generations of selective breeding to create a domestic species. It's one thing to have, a legitimate animal sanctuary or, a zoo, and not every pet owner with an exotic animal is irresponsible. Some are very responsible. Some are very knowledgeable about this animal. They've had training, they've had experience. They make sure that the animal has a proper diet, that its enclosure is spacious, and they have room to do whatever that animal needs to do. And not every, exotic pet owner is naive or delusional about what they're owning. But sadly, many of these wild animals are acquired illegally and oftentimes in very sketchy living conditions. And this can lead to some pretty brutal tragedies when people don't have the right enclosures, when they don't take the necessary precautions, when they're not involving animal control and a proper veterinarian who understands whatever specific species they're caring for. When those things aren't put in place, tragedies are bound to happen. And today, we will be looking into just that, the dark side of owning wild or exotic animals as pets. So, non domesticated animals as pets. And a quick trigger warning if you are like me, I'm an animal lover. It's hard for me to even do research on these types of stories because it makes me very sad. It makes me sad for the animal being in that situation. And it also makes me sad for the pet owners and the people, who live either in the house with this exotic pet or live near this exotic pet. It's just a tough situation when an animal attack happens. And so be mindful of that moving forward. If you don't think you can handle those topics today, I would go ahead and just skip this entire video because we will be deep diving into some pretty brutal attacks. So, with all that being said, let's go ahead and get started. This first case is the story of Amber Michelle Couch of Odessa, Texas, who had a 150-pound pet mountain lion. And I have to admit, when I see videos of lions in sanctuaries showing love to their trainers and caretakers, it makes me want a lion. I mean, when I see lions getting excited to see their trainers, things like that. It kind of reminds me of my dog. My dog sort of looks like a lion when he's, gallivanting around our backyard, especially when we let our grass in the backyard grow a little bit taller. It literally looks like a little lion cub, just kind of prowling around in the Serengeti. And I think many of us grew up with The Lion King. And so I don't know about you, but I've always had a soft spot for lions. And that being said, I wouldn't want to be, in the same room as a lion unless there's like a handler, and just knowing that this lion has had, the proper training to be socialized around other human beings. And like I said, I completely get the appeal. And many people actually raise lions from when they are cubs. And so it's really easy to see how someone could get attached to this type of animal. And when they grow bigger and maybe become a bit more difficult to manage, I can understand why it would be difficult to get rid of that animal. It's like your baby, it's hard. But at the end of the day, these big cats are apex predators. And so it takes a lot of resources to keep big cats healthy, keep them engaged, keep them well fed and properly trained. And so to do this, the person who is owning or caring for these pets, they need proper training, support from a qualified vet who specializes in care of big cats. You need proper containment spaces, the proper diet, and just a thorough understanding of their behavior. You may be thinking, well, oh, I have a cat, so I kind of get cat behavior, but no, every species of cat has, little nuances, and there is something so incredibly different from a big cat to the domesticated house cat. It's just, there's not a lot of comparisons, and especially when it comes to their behavior and their size. Owning big cats is incredibly dangerous. And sadly, it doesn't seem that in this story, Amber, she didn't really take the proper measures to ensure the safety for the animal and also those around it. And Amber had been cited a couple times by animal control in the state of Texas because they found that the lion's cage was way too small. There was also these gaps in the cage where the lion's not going to be able to get out, but if someone were to get too close, that could be incredibly hazardous. And the lion was also not up to date on its vaccinations, which means that Amber was not regularly taking this animal to a vet. And sadly, this lion's life was about to get a whole lot worse. In 2011, Amber's 4-year-old nephew was visiting, and they got a little bit too close to the lion's cage, and the lion attacked. And thankfully, the young boy survived, but was scarred permanently and was hospitalized. Honestly, it is truly amazing that this little boy even survived. And tragically, the lion had to be euthanized. It attacked someone and it had to be euthanized. And what frustrates me about cases like this one is that animals in these types of circumstances, when there's some kind of wild animal attack, and this is true in this case and also in many of the other cases that we're going to discuss, the animal ends up being killed. And this is an animal that shouldn't have been in this situation in the first place. They belong in the wild. And it's different when a animal is rescued and is in a sanctuary and, you know, it's a wildlife sanctuary meant to increase the population of this animal and preserve this animal. But when it's a normal person who doesn't have that experience and is just keeping this wild animal as a pet, this wild animal really shouldn't have been there. And it really just did what an animal does. It sees something and it swipes at it, or, it's an apex predator. I mean, it's very prey driven. And so it's very, very sad that this little boy got hurt, and thank God he survived. And nothing else, bad happened to him or anyone else in this home. But it also really, really saddens me that this lion also lost its life. A lion that shouldn't have been there in the first place. Next, we have another lion attack, although this one is much bigger than a mountain lion. And in this case, the people actually had the resources and space to keep exotic animals, but they didn't have enough team members there and just not enough experience to make sure that it was a safe environment. In 2004, on a southern Illinois farm, the Abel family had a small zoo called the Cougar Bluff Enterprise. And this is a husband and wife duo, Al and Kathy Abel. And they had several exotic animals, including wolves, bobcats, cougars, and even an African lion named Simba. And this lion was almost 500 pounds. Simba the lion had actually been with the couple since he was a small cub. And prior to keeping big cats and wolves, the couple had raised horses. And the couple actually had these big cats and these wolves legally. And for years, there were no incidents. Kathy Abel did the annual license. She renewed it every single year with the USDA to be able to legally exhibit wolves and big cats. And so this couple was doing, sort of all the things they were supposed to do. And they even had their farm inspected from time to time. The Abel's farm had last been inspected on January 5th, 2004, and this was just a few weeks before tragedy struck. On February 12th, 2004, Al, the husband, he went to clean Simba's enclosure. And typically, this is a two-person job. And this was actually the first time that Al had done it on his own. When he decided to do this alone, I guess he felt like he had enough experience to be able to, do this cleaning and to be able to transport the lion into its second pen. And for those who are unfamiliar with big cats, it is good practice and really it's expected that you have two pens for each large cat. And basically, the large enclosure, the biggest pen, this is where the animal lives most of the time. And the smaller one is called a shift pen. And basically, the shift pen is where the animal stays while its larger enclosure is being cleaned. And this is just, best practice. It's safe. It's safer for the animal. It's also safer for the humans who are cleaning its cage. And so Al was usually very careful in handling his exotic pets, but this afternoon, he made a fatal mistake. And this was on top of him doing this cleaning by himself, which he really should have had a second person with him. But this big mistake that he unfortunately did was he actually forgot to lock the door to the shift pen that he had put Simba in while he was cleaning the other cage. And when his wife, Kathy, returned to the property, she was met with a disaster zone. When Kathy returned to the property, she saw that one of her dogs was actually killed, and she couldn't find her husband, Al, anywhere. Simba, the lion, was actually roaming free on the edge of the Shawnee National Forest. And this is a very large forest. It's 277 1,000 acres. And all the other animals on the farm, like the cougars, bobcats, they all seemed very agitated, like pacing around, and something was very, very off. And clearly, something terrible had happened. The local police were called, and there was a tense standoff between Simba the lion and the police. And sadly, the ending of this standoff ended up with Simba being shot to death with a AK-47. And basically, they did this to protect, the people in the surrounding areas. It's so incredibly sad that the lion had to be killed, but you can't have a lion roaming around and potentially hurt someone else. It's a very dangerous situation having this wild animal that is not indigenous to this land just be roaming around, and especially an apex predator like an African lion. I mean, this is a large creature. And like I said, sadly, the police and also Kathy had to make the decision to go ahead and shoot the lion when, they weren't having any success trying to get it back into the enclosure. They found Al Abel's body near the lion cage, and he bled to death from a massive bite in his leg. Paramedics came and they tried CPR to revive Al, but it was no use as he was clearly already deceased. And the coroner actually determined that he had died within minutes from this bite wound on his left thigh. And so, sadly, Al passed away, and also Simba the lion was killed as well. Kathy Abel donated Simba's body to zoology students at Southern Illinois University so that at least his body could be used to help, these zoology students learn more about this animal. I can't imagine what Kathy must have been thinking, having lost both her husband and one of her beloved pets in one day. And actually, it was two pets because not only did Simba the lion get killed, but also it's evident that not only did Simba kill the husband, but he also went after one of their dogs that was on the property. And so it's just a incredibly sad story. And it just really shows that even an animal that you raise from the time it's a baby, a cub, it does not necessarily mean that that animal will always be on your side and could possibly turn one day. Wolf dogs, or half wolf, half dog hybrids, are becoming more and more popular as pets, especially in the United States. In fact, in the States, there are many states where people are allowed to own one of these wolf dog hybrids. And they do have, regulations on caging and vaccines that they need to get. And they do have to have, I think identification and like a license. But there are some states where there are no laws at all. You can just have one of these wolf dog hybrids, and yeah, you can just do with it what you will. There are some states who completely ban ownership of these animals. On the list I found, some of these states were like Connecticut and Hawaii. But where I live in Missouri, apparently there are some regulations with it. And I don't know if it's in all parts of Missouri or if it goes by county. It's kind of nuanced, but apparently in some parts of Missouri, if you get the proper, you know, registration and all that jazz, you can actually own one of these wolf dog hybrids. And I'm not going to lie, these are beautiful. I mean, they are gorgeous to look at. I'm a huge dog lover. I have always been intrigued by wolves, but 65%, and the number could be even higher now, but 65% of these wolf dog hybrids actually end up in rescue situations or they end up being euthanized because the owners become overwhelmed and they can't properly care for them. These dogs have a high prey instinct. They also are known to be escape artists, and you have to really keep your eye on them. They are fast, they are strong, they can jump high, they can get into things. They are also not easy to train. Um, these dogs are known to be very independent. And in my opinion, I think that if you want to own one of these dogs, you might do well with having some background with either working with wolves or understanding their behaviors, really to be a good fit for these pups. And sadly, I don't think most people who own these wolf dog hybrids actually have done any of the proper research and training, and a lot of times they are acquired illegally, which makes it even more difficult to make sure that these wolf dog hybrids are really truly domesticated enough to be in people's homes. And sadly, when these types of things happen, a lot of times it can end in tragedy. And even if you do have the experience with working with wolves, keeping wild animals is always a risk. This next story is about the brutal mauling of a woman from Pennsylvania, and her name is Sandra Piovesan, and she had nine of these wolf dog hybrids as pets. That to me is just mind blowing. And she loved them unconditionally, and she believed that they loved her back. Before her death in 2006, Sandra had been raising hybrid wolves for about 10 years, and Sandra lived alone with dozens of animals, including the 9 wolf dogs. And I don't know how she managed all of these animals, especially these 9 wolf hybrids with their nature. I mean, I feel like it would have been a full-time job. I get overwhelmed sometimes with my dog and it's just him, and but sometimes he drives me crazy with the antics that he gets up to, and I can't imagine how much money on food you would have to spend, vet bills, making sure that they have the proper enclosure. I mean, it must have been very expensive. And so I don't know. I don't know how she managed all of these animals, but one thing is for sure. Despite the fact that Sandra had been raising these hybrid wolves for years and she felt and claimed that she had all of this experience, at the end of the day, she actually didn't even have a license from the state that she lived in to have these hybrid wolf dogs. So she needed a Pennsylvania Game Commission license to own these wolf hybrids, but she was able to sort of get around this by getting state dog licenses instead for these animals. And the wolf dog hybrids were kept in enclosures outside and provided with, things that dogs need, food, toys. They apparently had this like replica igloo and a plastic playhouse. And one of the dogs, the wolf dogs, was named Spirit. And this dog actually lived in the house with her. The rest of them were in this enclosure. And the hybrids were occasionally fed with roadkill, and the smell obviously bothered Sandra's neighbors, so much so that she actually received many complaints, which I can imagine the smell would be awful. According to one of Sandra's longtime friends, Sandra kept the wolves as part of her Native American heritage, but there were also rumors that she had been breeding and selling puppies without actually calling them, wolf dog hybrids. And she also failed to vaccinate these dogs for rabies. And so that's a little bit scary. If that rumor is true, imagine buying a dog and you don't know it has half wolf in its genes, and then you see this dog grow up. You try to train it and all this stuff, and for some reason, man, it's just not getting socialized the way my other dogs are. I wonder why that is. And it's because someone who sold you the dog didn't actually fill you in to the fact that this isn't just a dog, it's a dog wolf hybrid, which is a completely different animal. And so it seems like the conditions in which these hybrid wolves were living in was not the best. And there may have also been some sketchy behavior happening behind the scenes. It is all speculative. I don't know how much of it is true, but even her friend actually reported that a year prior to Sandra's death, these hybrid dog wolves were exhibiting signs of intense stress. And they even killed one of their older pack members, which is really concerning and was probably should have been a big red flag that something is maybe not right, and maybe these wolves should be rehomed to like a sanctuary. But sadly, that did not happen, and it was actually Crystal Piovason, who is Sandra's daughter. She was the one who actually ended up finding her mother's body in the wolf enclosure. And Sandra had been brutally mauled. She had multiple soft tissue injuries, and sadly, she succumbed to those injuries and passed away. Crystal and Sandra were meant to meet up for breakfast that morning, and when her mother didn't show, Crystal decided to check up on her, and that is when she discovered that her mother had passed away. It is unclear what triggered the wolf attack, and we don't know if it was just one of the animals who attacked her, some of the animals, all of the, wolf hybrids. We don't really know. But sadly, all 9 of the wolf dogs were euthanized. And like I said, it's awful because I think in the right type of setting, they probably could have lived very long, very healthy lives. And also, Sandra would not have lost her own life. And so it's just another frustrating truth about owning these wild animals is that you never know what could happen? They could absolutely turn on you, and you just don't know. The final case that we are going to be looking at is the case of a monkey who was kept as a pet, and this monkey actually killed one of his owners and seriously injured the other. Monkeys tend to be seen as fairly gentle creatures. They aren't as big as chimpanzees, and they certainly don't have the reputation that chimps do for violent acts. I think most people have probably heard of, the Travis the chimp story. He mauled someone's face off, and luckily she survived, but chimpanzees are very large and very territorial and are very prone to violence. But we don't often hear as much about monkeys and monkey attacks. But despite their size, you would be wise to not underestimate a monkey because they do have, this playful nature, but they can be vicious and they do have a very strong bite. In 2019, a 72-year-old man and his son from Malaysia were both attacked by their pet monkey. They were attempting to get the monkey to climb trees and retrieve fruit for them. And in Malaysia, this is a very common practice. And there are even monkey schools that teach a very specific species of monkey called the southern pig-tailed macaque. And they teach this type of monkey to retrieve fruits from trees, usually like coconuts. And they actually are a huge part of Malaysian culture and they help assist the local economy. This practice has been occurring for over 100 years, and each monkey is typically taught at a monkey school for 2 to 3 weeks before getting a job as one of these, fruit retrievers. And there is an ideal age for these animals to begin their training. And the monkey in this story was much older than the typical age where you would start, you know, molding and training, these monkeys' minds to do this very specific skill and to work with humans safely. And this could be why the training that this monkey had, this could be why it didn't stick, is that it sort of outgrew the window of opportunity for when it can be trained. But this is sort of speculative, it's sort of hard to really know what the animal was thinking. It can't talk or give you a reason why. But basically, in the story, what happens is that the son goes out into the coconut grove and actually sees his father laying on the ground, and he sees that something's wrong, that maybe he got hurt. So he goes, to investigate when suddenly the monkey attacked the son and actually left him with an injury to his neck. A nearby neighbor had heard screaming from the grove, and luckily, the son got the medical attention that he needed. However, it was too late for the father, and the old man succumbed to his injuries. Nobody knows whether the monkey mistook the men's heads for like coconuts, and like that's why it went after them, or maybe it was just in a neck biting type of mood. But regardless of the reasoning, the monkey's bite did so much damage that he actually bit through the old man's major artery. And this is what caused him to bleed out and then die. And it just goes to show that even if a wild animal has had training and, has a specific job or a skill to help humans, sometimes things go wrong. An animal could get spooked, or an animal could just turn on you. You never know. It's very unpredictable, even if this animal has had, some type of training. And this is just a very sad example of just that. An animal who had training, but maybe not sufficient training, or maybe even with all the proper training, accidents sometimes happen, or sometimes an animal gets spooked and instinct kicks in. And so it's very sad, and it just goes to show you have to be aware of your surroundings when working with wild animals because you just never know. So, in conclusion, is exotic pet ownership wrong or unethical? Well, like most things in life, it is nuanced and we have to look at it case by case. Even animal experts like Steve Irwin can become a victim to an animal attack. However, in the United States, many people do own these wild or exotic animals, and they do not do the proper work to keep the animals safe and to keep those around the animals safe. It is also a bit too easy to acquire an exotic animal in the United States, and that is very concerning. I think the best thing to do if you are considering owning an exotic pet is to do your research and also ask yourself these types of questions. Am I really the best fit for this animal? Will it thrive living with me, or is it simply just surviving? And do I have the knowledge, adequate space, the proper licensure, a vet readily available, and the time to properly invest in this animal to give it the best life possible? And I think if people actually asked themselves those questions and reflected and answered them honestly, I think we would see a lot less exotic pet ownership and also a lot less exotic pet attacks. But with all that being said, I hope that you enjoyed and learned something in this episode. And I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. If you're on YouTube, watching the video, please sound off in the comment section your opinions. Do you think it's someone's right to be able to keep exotic animals in their home if they wish? Or do you think there needs to be more regulation? Do you think it should be just completely illegal to have exotic animals in or around your home? Do you think it's selfish, or do you think it can be a good experience for these wild animals? I would love to hear what your thoughts are. I'm kind of in the middle. I think that there definitely should be regulations, and I do think that many people acquire exotic pets without doing the proper research. And honestly, they get these pets for selfish reasons without really considering, is this the best thing for this animal? And yeah, I think it sort of varies case by case. And so let me know what your thoughts are, and I will see you in the next episode. Thank you so much for joining me. It's goodbye for now, but I hope to haunt you again soon.